Our focus this hour is the Middle East, where there are growing fears of a wider war. Iran has retaliated after Israel and the US launched a barrage of airstrikes across Iran. We saw several sites hit in what Donald Trump has described on social media as major combat operations. The Iranians have hit back with force right across the region. Plumes of smoke seen in an area of Bahrain near the headquarters of the US Navy's Fifth Fleet. An airbase in Doha also hit, where there was a significant US military presence. And this is a missile captured on camera over Dubai in the UAE. Thousands of people, residents and tourists, have been caught up in the strikes. Let's begin our coverage with our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, on the day's developments.
Israel and the US went back to war with Iran just after breakfast time in Tehran, hitting the capital and sites across the country. It's hard to get information about what's happening there. Video of an attack on a school in southern Iran is circulating. Iranian state TV was reporting 85 killed. This is a dangerous moment with unpredictable consequences in the world's most turbulent region. Israel said the whole operation is a preemptive attack without producing evidence of an imminent threat. Sirens sounded immediately in Israel. War is political. Successful ones require a precise definition of victory. Donald Trump's was wide-ranging, possibly unachievable, definitely a gamble.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated.
Iran tried to deliver on its threat of a devastating response aimed at the extensive network of US bases in the Gulf. This was Qatar, as well as Israel.
Go, go, go! Get inside.
In Dubai, tourists looking for winter sun had a nasty reminder of the region's realities. Close by in Bahrain, this appears to be a strike aimed at the big US naval base. Iran says it will use more powerful missiles than the ones it fired in last summer's war. An interceptor rocket went up. Iran will hope that as the days pass, the US and Israel will start running out of defensive missiles. In Israel, the military released video of its command center and said it had been planning the attacks with the Americans for several months.
Challenging days await us. Every military action involves risk, but the risk of doing nothing is greater. Because if we do not act, we will get a nuclear Iran, an Iran with tens of thousands of ballistic missiles.
In Tehran, a compound used by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was targeted. The Iranians said he wasn't there when it was destroyed. Regime supporters rallied around the flag. It would take more than killing the supreme leader to destroy the regime. It has a complex political system underpinned by ideology, corruption, and the ruthless use of force against dissent. In January, big protests against the regime and the economic crisis were crushed with live bullets that killed thousands of people. Donald Trump promised to protect them and seems to believe that the regime will fall if they try again after America and Israel's onslaught.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond.
At dusk, the Fairmont Hotel on Dubai's Palm was hit. It isn't clear if it was a target or if it was missile debris from an interception. The fire took hold. Iran's leaders will now be calculating how to ride out the war, how to survive, and how to manage its consequences.
I'm ready.
Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Straight to Jerusalem now. Let's join our Middle East correspondent Hugo Pacheco, who is there. Hugo, the air raid sirens have been sounding all day. What's the situation across Israel this evening?
Yeah, Lucy, so about an hour ago, we heard loud explosions from the sky, and again, an indication that air defenses had been activated. And this has been the situation throughout the day across Israel, with multiple air raid sirens and then loud explosions with air defenses intercepting those missiles that have been fired by Iran in response to these attacks by the US and Israel. Now, emergency services said they had received calls of 3 locations that had been hit. I think the indication here is that those locations were hit by debris that fell from the sky from those interceptions. 1 person has been injured, but again, this is another indication of how sophisticated the air defense systems in Israel are. And I was here in Israel last year during the 12-day war, and it was a war in which the Israeli military managed to intercept the vast majority of the missiles that had been launched by Iran during the conflict, a mission that was celebrated as a success by the Israeli military. Now, at the end of the Jewish Shabbat, the Prime Minister's office released a picture of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a phone call with the US President Donald Trump. And I think the message here is to show that this is a coordinated campaign between the American and the Israeli military. And earlier today, there was a statement by the Prime Minister trying to justify military action against Iran. Again, he talked about something that he's been talking about for a very long time, for decades, and that is what he sees as the existential threat posed by Iran's nuclear program. And I thought it was interesting that the Prime Minister, just like President Donald Trump, talked about creating a situation that would allow the Iranian population to essentially change the leadership in the country. So again, the suggestion here being that one of the goals here of the campaign could be to create a situation in Iran that could lead to a change in the leadership of the country.
And Hugo, what about the attacks on Iran? The army in Israel saying that the air raids on Iran are the largest ever that they've conducted in their history, in Air Force history. What do we know about the scale and the scope of those attacks on Iran?
Yeah, Lucy, so we had a statement by the Israeli military saying that 200 fighter jets had targeted more than 500 targets across Iran, including missile launchers and also facilities linked to the Iranian military. But we've also seen that a number of buildings related to the Iranian leadership were hit in the first hours of this military campaign. Again, a campaign between the Israeli and the American military, which I think is again another indication that perhaps one of the goals here is to create a situation for the regime change, as President Trump put it, as he described the leadership in Iran. And I think the timing of it obviously shows that the Israelis and the Americans, despite those negotiations that were happening for a deal to try to curb Iran's nuclear program and avert a war with Iran, they saw here an opportunity to strike the country. They see the leadership in Iran in a very weak position, not only because of what happened last year during the 12-day war, in which nuclear facilities but also military installations, military capabilities in Iran were significantly damaged, but also because of the protests that happened earlier this year, those huge-scale nationwide protests that were brutally repressed by the Iranian authorities. But again, a crisis of legitimacy here inside Iran, also a huge economic crisis in the country that has led to huge discontent. So perhaps they saw here an opportunity, and this is something that President Trump mentioned in his video earlier today when he urged the Iranian public to take over their government, and he described this as perhaps a unique opportunity in generations for the Iranian population.
Hugo, thanks so much. Well, Iran launching those attacks throughout the Middle East. Let's show you this photo we've received from an eyewitness. And what you can see here is a plume of smoke. This is near the Fairmont, the Palm Hotel in Dubai. Iranian state media reporting as well that an attack has been launched on Dubai. It's not clear exactly what Iran is targeting, but there is a US military presence in the country. The UAE Ministry of Defense has said it has intercepted a new wave of missiles and drones as well. That's according to reports from the Emirates news agency, cited as well by Reuters. We do have blurry images of a plume of black smoke seen in Dubai. And we have these pictures of strikes as well that we've been getting. They have been shared with us from a British tourist, Luke Leslie, who is in Dubai at the moment. Let's take you to my colleague Barbara Pledasher, who joins us now from Doha and Qatar. Barbara, how have Gulf states been targeted today?
They have been getting hit by missiles since shortly after the Israeli and U.S. airstrikes began, and by and large, the Gulf countries have said that they've intercepted the missiles, shot most of them down, but some of the very striking exceptions you've already mentioned there, the Fairmont Hotel being one of them. The image of that hotel, that luxury hotel in that sort of very high-end neighborhood in the archipelago there that has many luxury hotels burning, I think is quite jarring and shocking to many people. You also have a residential building in Bahrain that has been hit, apparently by a drone. Also, the international airport in Kuwait, again struck by a drone. The authorities there said not much damage, a few injuries, but it is quite an event to have your airport hit by a missile or a drone, given the significance of air safety. So you've got the Gulf countries having prepared or having been warned ahead of time by the Iranians that they would strike U.S. military bases that are scattered throughout the region. There's 13 of them. One of the reasons why they have been firing missiles here to Qatar and also UAE and Bahrain, the Navy base there, and Kuwait. But it seems that there are other areas, civilian areas, that are being hit either because of shrapnel from missiles being struck down, or you've got these drones, reports of drone attacks. So it is a very unstable time for the Gulf, even though they have been expecting something like this for some time.
Barbara, just while we're talking, we do have some live pictures coming to us from Iraq. Earlier, we did see Baghdad, the government there, denouncing these strikes on Iran, warning against involving Iraq in any way. And now what we can see here, and it's hard to tell how big these protests are, but we've got people in Iraq and Baghdad denouncing the strikes and protesting in solidarity with Iran. But where you are, the Gulf states have worked so hard to prevent this exact thing from happening today. So what kind of position are they in now? They're condemning the attacks, but how do you think they're now going to respond?
Well, it's not clear, really. You're right. They have, the Qataris, the UAE have condemned the attacks very strongly. They have said that this violates international law and national sovereignty, that they reserve the right to respond. But their main concern here, which has been expressed in different ways in the weeks and months actually leading up to this point, is that they're worried about instability in the region, that the war in Iran will come cross the borders in various ways, that the Iranians might end up directly targeting the oil and gas infrastructure that's so crucial for the economy of this area, that if as President Trump has said, there should be an uprising, or the people of Iran should take it into their own hands to take over the government. What does that actually mean? There are various scenarios there, but the concern, I think, in the Gulf is, again, about instability, whether there might be infighting, a civil war, refugees, weapons flowing across borders. They've seen that sort of scenario in Iraq and Syria. So they have been very concerned, working very, very hard to try to prevent this, trying to mediate between the Iranians and the Americans at a very top level, leadership and government ministers making these phone calls, making these trips Clearly, the President of the United States decided not to take their advice. He took the advice of his Israeli allies. How they will respond now, they've said they reserve the right to respond. I think they will calculate that very carefully. They will be wanting to manage the fallout, and I imagine that they will be wanting to try to get back on a diplomatic track as soon as possible. But the United States and Israel haven't really left them much wiggle room there at all, given that they've announced that the goal of this is regime change.
Barbara, thanks so much. Barbara Pledusher there in Doha. We are waiting to hear again from President Trump. He did release the statement on Truth Social this morning, the 8 or 9 minute video that he had, but all eyes now on Mar-a-Lago. He's not in Washington, of course. He's down at his residence in Florida, but watching events for us from the US is my colleague, Katrina Perry. Let's take you over to the White House. She is there for us. Katrina, we've been keeping an eye on Mar-a-Lago. We'll certainly go there if we hear from Donald Trump. Is there an expectation that he will talk to the media soon?
We don't have an expectation at this point of any formal remarks, but as we know with this president and this White House, that could change at any time. Having said that, he has been speaking to a journalist via phone. In the last hour or so, he was speaking to John Levine from the Washington Free Beacon, who asked him about the ongoing campaign in Iran. We know, of course, President Trump has referred to this as a multi-day campaign. And so the president told John Levine that it's going very well. That's all he would say. He wouldn't answer any more of the journalist's follow-up questions on anything to do with detail or anything like that, just to say going very well. So who knows, perhaps we'll have some more phone calls with President Trump throughout the day. We are learning some more information, though, about just what happened in the early hours of the morning, as it was here in the US when these strikes began. We're told that Vice President J.D. Vance, he was here at the White House in the Situation Room, along with the Energy Secretary Chris Wright and the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. They were both here, as was Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, all here in the Situation Room, connected via secure link to Mar-a-Lago, to the facility that the President has there. And that is when all of these strikes and it began, and he gave the green light for that. We know that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has been in touch with some of the leadership on Capitol Hill. He's been briefing what's known as the Group of Eight. The Group of Eight individuals who are very senior on Capitol Hill, the Republican and Democratic leaders in the Senate, in the House, and the Republican chairperson and the Democratic deputy chairperson, essentially, of the Intelligence Committee. They were receiving briefings actually all week, it turns out, as to what was going on, and they were notified in advance that these strikes were going to take place. Now, the Democrats are, more broadly speaking, very angry that they don't have more information on this. They feel that the president acted beyond his powers in not going to Congress before this and seeking a war declaration. So they are having an emergency caucus meeting tomorrow. That will be Sunday night, and we're told that members of the administration will brief them. There is much political debate about whether the president acted within or outside of the powers afforded to him under the Constitution in launching this preemptive strike, is the word being used by Israel and by the US on Iran. The president himself did use the word war during those remarks in that 8-minute video that he posted overnight here in the US, and that's what's really causing a lot of the problems with this, whether he acted within international law. When he's using that word war, by law in this country, he needs a declaration of war from Congress. Now, as it turns out, there was a bill to be voted on this week, War Powers Resolution Act, to exactly do this, to stop the president from taking unilateral action in Iran without permission, essentially, from Congress. Now, the House will sit on Capitol Hill on Tuesday and Wednesday. As of now, that bill is still slated to be voted on. Whether it will pass or fail, we don't know at this point in time. We're hearing from Democrats and Republicans, many of them in support broadly of launching an attack on Iran, as they were last June with Operation Midnight Hammer. They do see Iran as a threat to this country, particularly in terms of its nuclear capabilities. But an issue many of the politicians have is how the president went about this, what his legal standing in international law was for taking this action. And as we know, he's referred to it as a multi-day operation, so very much still underway.
And Katrina, with Americans waking up to this news this morning, how convinced do you think they'll be by President Trump's argument for this war, why he says he is conducting this action?
Well, I expect we'll see a lot of polling on that in the coming days, and the polling that we've seen in the last few weeks, as this has been very much on the radar, of course, for well over a month at this point, is that the nation is broadly split on this. They feel very strongly when it comes to deploying the US military, the men and women of the military, to other parts of the world and putting them in danger. It is something that this administration swore not to do on the campaign trail in President Trump's inaugural address, and indeed we hear that many times from many members of the administration, not least the Defence Secretary or War Secretary Pete Hegseth. So a lot of questions as to how dangerous a situation this is for the members of the US military. Because again, going back to that video that the President posted, he did reference in great detail the threat to American lives, to the members of the military who are carrying out this strike. And he said lives could be lost. Sometimes this happens in war, he said. So that is what's giving a lot of pause for thought to the American people. And also how strongly he made out that case that he's acting in the interests of American national security. We were expecting to hear a lot from him about that in the State of the Union address that he delivered before the joint session of Congress on Tuesday night. That was a time with which he had a massive live television audience in this country, and he was expected to make the case to the nation. He didn't do that. He just very briefly mentioned Iran and moved on. In this video overnight is when he's chosen to do that, and he's gone back over 47 years of interactions between Iran and the US trying to make that case. Now, how strongly he made it, the jury is still out on that one, and as you say, it's still, it's just 1:20 here on the East Coast, even earlier across the various time zones in the US, as people are waking up to this news on Saturday morning, and news that it isn't just a set of limited strikes, as we saw in June with Operation Midnight Hammer, but that it's a multi-day operation with risk to the American military.